Europe is cracking at the seams. Size. What used to be sold as European unity and a coherent political project now looks like a tired administrative machine pretending it can do geopolitics. The EU works in one mode only: peacetime management. When growth is steady, energy is cheap, and the outside world doesn't force hard choices, the system looks stable. When turbulence starts, it exposes the ugly truth. Sarcastic. The EU is a market with flags, not a single political subject. Pause. Let's start with the origin story, because it matters. The EU did not begin as a moral project. It began as a money and industry project: coal and steel. In the early 1950s, the idea was simple and clever. Tie strategic industries together so war becomes economically irrational. That was the European coal and steel community logic, and it was pragmatic. It worked. Then it expanded. A lot. The flagship moment was the 2004 enlargement: 10 new countries at once. Publicly, it was framed as Europe reunified. In practice, the mechanism was always simpler: new markets, cheap labor, new consumers, new funds, new dependent political elites. That's not an insult. That's how systems behave. Today, the EU is 27 countries and roughly 450 million people, with a nominal GDP around $21.1 trillion in 2025. For comparison, the US is about $30.6 trillion, China about $19.4 trillion, Russia about $2.8 trillion. So yes, on paper, Europe is huge, and yet it is weak in the one arena that matters during turbulence: political will and unified decision-making. That's the core contradiction. This is why I say Europe can only be united in calm weather. When everything is fine, the EU runs like a corporate system: regulations, procedures, financial flows, nice speeches. But it doesn't set hard strategic goals. It mostly reacts to goals shaped by external players, and that worked as long as the global environment stayed comfortable. Now we get to the question everyone loves to dramatize. What does Putin have to do with Europe cracking? Here's the punchline. Putin doesn't split Europe with tanks. He splits it with the possibility of a deal. Not ideology, not romance, simple economics. And the most sensitive nerve here is energy. In 2021, Russia supplied about 45% of the EU's gas imports. That means Europe's industrial competitiveness was built for decades on a basic formula: cheap inputs, plus high-value industry plus exports, plus social comfort. Then Europe tried to act like inputs are optional and prosperity is powered by slogans. The moment energy becomes expensive and uncertain, every country inside the EU starts thinking like a country again. What is good for me? Germany wants industry and exports. France wants autonomy and influence. Southern Europe wants stability and tourism. Eastern members want security, but often underestimate the economic cost of permanent mobilization. Brussels wants everyone to behave like one organism, but they are not one organism. They are a bundle of interests forced into one framework. That's where Putin becomes a wedge, because Europe's unity in the last years has been glued together by fear messaging. A big external threat is useful. It allows discipline. It allows censorship light. It allows moral pressure. It allows no debate, we are at war rhetoric. But fear collapses the moment an economic alternative appears. Putin's role as enemy helps Brussels unify through fear. Putin's role as possible supplier, possible trade partner, destroys the glue through incentives. Fear cannot compete with a warm apartment and a working factory. This is not philosophy. This is human biology. Now, a short reality check. This is not a fan club speech. Russia has plenty of internal problems. First, scale. Russia's economy is not comparable to the EU or the US. Roughly $2.08 trillion versus EU's $21.1 trillion. Second, management. Russia often undermines itself with weak incentives, clumsy regulation, and industrial policy that protects mediocrity instead of forcing competitiveness. If you raise barriers and protect an industry indefinitely, you don't build strength. You build a greenhouse for weak products and expensive excuses. Then you wonder why people don't respect the outcome. Markets are harsh, but they also tell the truth. Third, Russia's offer to Europe is not friendship, it's mutual benefit. That's fine. The world runs on this. Just don't pretend it's poetry. Now, the quick USA-China-EU comparison, because everyone likes to live in myths. In 2025, the US real growth is around 2.7%, the EU around 1.4%, Russia around 0.6%. The US can keep geopolitical pressure longer because it has scale, finance, and an ecosystem that still drives innovation. China grows with discipline and industrial strategy. The EU grows slowly and carries internal contradictions that become lethal when stress rises. So what happens next? Europe's real weakness is this. It wants to behave like a geopolitical empire without a unified army, without unified logistics, without unified decision-making, and without a clear why that citizens will accept when living standards decline. When people see higher costs, slower growth, and endless emergency mode, they begin asking the only question that matters. Who sold this plan, and who gets paid while we swallow the bill? This is the reason Europe is cracking. The system was designed for stability. It was never designed for a long crisis. And that brings me back to the central point. Putin splits Europe not because he is some genius supervillain. He splits it because the EU's unity is fragile under incentives. The EU can pretend to be one moral bloc only when the economics are comfortable. When economics bite, the bloc returns to its true nature, a negotiation arena between national interests. Final conclusion, plain and brutal. The European Union is strong as a market. It is weak as a single political actor. And as long as Europe keeps trying to build unity on fear rather than on tangible prosperity, any economic alternative will act like a crowbar. Putin doesn't need rockets to crack the EU narrative. The possibility of trade already does the job.